Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Sarah Rumpf, contributing editor at Mediaite. Sarah, I really appreciate you coming on with me.
Thanks. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you. And you've been covering the war between Disney and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for over a year now. I mean, I remember the first time I heard about this war, I actually read your piece, and it was almost a year ago to the date. So can you take us back? Let's take a stroll down memory lane, if you will. And what is the origin story for this feud?
So what's going on is DeSantis needs good culture war headlines to get on Fox News. I firmly believe that that's the whole motivating factor behind this, because it doesn't make sense on a practical sense. It's not legal. It's not constitutional. It's not good governance. And it's just escalated beyond all connection to like logic or, real life. The start of this was the Parental Rights and Education Bill, an education bill last year. It was commonly called the Don't Say Gay Bill by its critics in the media a lot. It restricted what subjects could be taught at elementary school. Just this year, they've raised that now to higher grades. The bill was criticized by a lot of liberal groups, LGBTQ groups, and others on libertarian grounds, about free speech grounds, things like that. Disney was far from the only one to criticize it, and their criticism was very weak and very late in the game. There were hundreds and thousands of other groups, even a big group of businesses in Central Florida that criticized it. And none of them seemed to be getting targeted for any sort of, government retaliation. What Disney did is there is a press release from the then CEO, Bob Chapek, that criticized the bill and said that Disney was going to do whatever it could to support the bill being repealed. The press release was toothless. There has been no action taken on it. The liberal groups that opposed the bill had already organized for pro bono attorneys and fundraised for all the legal expenses and everything. They filed a lawsuit the day that the governor signed the bill. Disney had no part in organizing that. They have not given one penny to that or any other legal effort. This was a press release to tell the employees, I hear you, I know you're upset, I feel your pain, please stop screaming at me. But that is what was used by DeSantis, then start escalating this aggression against Disney, which again is the state's largest employer and is a major driver for the entire state's economy. For those that don't know, we have no state income tax here. We are heavily dependent on taxes that are carried by tourists. So every time somebody comes here, they're paying sales taxes and everything they buy. They're contributing to the gas taxes, the hotel taxes. There's a specific tourist development tax that's on every single hotel stay. Every single one of those that doesn't live here and isn't putting their kids in the schools, but is still visiting and buying things, is paying for everything that we're doing that the government is spending in the state. So it just got very weird. What all this is about, the Florida Constitution requires counties to tax every taxpayer evenly by the same percentage. So if I have a $200,000 house and you have $1 million house, you'll pay 5 times as much in taxes, but we'll be paying the same percentage. The only exception to that is if the landowners agree to what's called a special taxing district. There's been a lot of misperceptions about the Reedy Creek Improvement District, the special taxing district on the Disney property. It is not a tax break. It is not some sort of scheme. It is something that was specifically agreed upon in a big charter that was entered into by the Florida legislature in the 1960s to allow Disney to pay extra taxes to build this infrastructure and provide these services at a level that neither county would be able to do. Disney has 25,000 acres currently. They sold parcel a couple of years ago, but that's a really big span. That's roughly 39 square miles. It stretches across 2 counties. Neither Orange or Osceola County had any ability in the 60s, and they have no ability now to take any of that over. Reedy Creek has been handling road construction and maintenance, landscaping, environmental issues, water, sewer treatment, electricity generation. They have a fire department, EMTs. They handle the building and permits and inspections. There's a lot to it. It's very complicated, and they're also providing everything at a higher level. The locals joke all the time that we wish that Mickey would take over running the highways because there's never any potholes on Disney roads. The street where my parents live is in unincorporated Orange County. There was a pothole there that took months to fix, and that was just last year, and the patch is already disintegrating, so someone's going to have to come out and fix it again. There's just little things like that. So the original battle that DeSantis, the initial shot was, there was a bill that was going to repeal the Reedy Creek Improvement District completely, just abolish it, which again made no sense. And the county, both the elected officials and the staffers were freaking out because they didn't have the ability to do that. And he ended up getting caught in a insurmountable problem. Like other local governments, this special taxing district at Reedy Creek is allowed to issue municipal bonds. And this is the only time that I've ever gotten major traffic on a municipal bond article. But when Disney has more than, or Reedy Creek has more than $1 billion in debt outstanding, and that would have fallen on me and every other taxpayer in Orange County and Osceola County, raising our taxes between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, depending on size. That was a major political problem that the governor could not stomach. So they came back with a new bill this year that said, oh, we're just going to nibble around some of the powers that Reedy Creek has. And instead of Disney and the Disney landowners appointing the board, then I, as the governor, are going to appoint the board. So that's the latest round of wild stuff that we've got right now, where the DeSantis appointed board is people that have no connections to Disney and are people who have come to prominence through various conservative activist ways for the most part. Florida Republican Party is on the board. She tweeted after she got appointed that she was on the Disney board, which obviously is not correct. She's not on the board of the Disney Corporation. She was appointed on the renamed Central Florida Tourism Development Board. And they've all made these comments that are very critical of Disney and critical of their entertainment content, critical about, things being politically correct or too LGBTQ friendly and stuff like that. This is supposed to be a board that is managing the land and property and infrastructure. The entertainment content has nothing to do with it. So we're getting again into some really complicated First Amendment issues that, every law professor and attorney and, legal expert that I've talked to about this is just flabbergasted at the level of free speech violations. Even if the government has the right to do something, they can't do it to you to punish you for your speech. And when you've got the governor himself saying that, Disney's corporate kingdom has come to an end and there's a new sheriff in town and we're going to stop these woke California values, and the members of the board saying that they're going to get Disney in line. The retaliatory intent is so blatant. So it's, I can't see that this doesn't end up in the courts. We seem to be rapidly heading that way.
Sarah, I really appreciate that breakdown there. You talked about a feud that really has been going on for a year, and it sounds like he opened up a can of worms that has First Amendment implications, political implications, economic implications. And I want to ask you about your reaction to a quote from the DeSantis appointed board. They said that an agreement between the outgoing board and Disney, quote, essentially makes Disney the government. What do you make to that assessment? Is there truth to that?
So what the problem is that none of these board members have any real experience running a theme park or running a special taxing district. The intent of a special taxing district is to take over some government functions. They're often referred to in statutes and legal text as quasi-government entities. For example, Reedy Creek, which has been was operating for over 50 years, ran a fire department. So instead, while Disney was paying all the taxes that they owed to Orange and Osceola County, but they were not asking Orange or Osceola County to provide fire services. They built fire stations. They hired firefighters. They bought equipment. They paid for that. So yes, that's a government type function. This critique from the new board it just shows that they don't actually understand what they're supposed to be doing. And I've made this comment on a couple other programs. Their whole approach that they're going to somehow force Disney to do something. I mean, if they're doing a Lilo and Stitch live action movie, if there's a gay alien, is this new board going to deny a building permit for an upgrade to the ride? I mean, none of it really makes sense. Yes, of course it's a government. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. There are, and again, this is not unique to Disney. There are about 1,800 of these special taxing districts across the state of Florida. This is the only one in the entire state that's being singled out for this sort of meddling.
Sarah, I love talking to you because you are a native Floridian. You are from Orlando, born and raised, so you have a really unique perspective on this. Being in Orlando, what is the response to this feud between DeSantis and Disney? Because DeSantis, as you know, is a widely popular governor, but do the people of Florida think this might be a misstep?
Yeah, I'm really starting to hear a lot of grumbling and just confusion over this because, again, like Disney was far from the most vocal critic on this. And while there's a lot of people that say, well, I may not like this particular content that Disney put out, or I don't want my kids watching the show, or the theme parks are too expensive, to say that the governor's handpicked people should be taking over this function of the park is just a little bit much. And keep in mind, like my family was here before Disney was. Disney absolutely changed Central Florida and changed Florida in ways that are both good and bad. But it's so intertwined with the state's economy, and what he's going after, from the perspective of a resident of this area, what he's going after is the part of Disney that has functioned at a high level for the benefit of the people of Florida. Just as some two short examples, the building codes that Reedy Creek follows, they're colloquially called the Epcot codes. 3 different contractors and architects and landscape people that I spoke to and interviewed in all my research for this called them a pain in the, I don't know if I can swear on here, but ASS. That was the phrase that they used, that they called them a pain in the But they also acknowledged that as tough as they were to comply with and higher demand, that they understood why Disney was doing it, that meant that they were ensuring a higher level of safety and quality for their guests. And it's the same thing with the environmental issues. Disney has this massive parcel that stretches across Central Florida. It intersects with the Florida Wildlife Corridor. It's like the last sponge of land before water starts getting into the Everglades system throughout South Florida. Disney maintains all of that water quality, both in their sewer treatment and everything else, at a higher level than any state or federal law would require. And that is to the benefit of the entire state. They also engage in a lot of flood mitigation activities. The hurricanes that came through last year, the water management district south of the Disney property communicated with Reedy Creek and specifically asked them to hold back floodwaters, which Reedy Creek did. And that is, if you've never looked into the physics of water, that is an expensive proposition. You've got to have physical structures and it requires electricity. I need to verify this, but I've been told by a Disney consultant that Disney partially flooded some of their own parcel to avoid water going further south into Osceola County. This is stuff that they've been doing to manage that land and manage that parcel that, churns along pretty well. There are valid criticisms of Disney, but like this is just absolutely bizarre. The latest news today is that what the governor is proposing is tearing apart some of the agreements with the Reedy Creek utilities to maybe find another utility company or sell off part of the property. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And for all of these Republicans like DeSantis who have marketed themselves as free supporters and free market capitalists and limited government, this is the height of major government meddling, and it just is really weird to see.
It sounds like from what you're saying that Central Florida's tourism and economy really hinges on Disney tourism. But I do want to talk about the political implications here. It's widely speculated that DeSantis will jump into the presidential race. In most polls, he is coming second only to frontrunner Donald Trump. So politically, is this a smart move? And how should he maneuver? It sounds from what you're saying, he is doubling down.
Right. And, as a former political consultant and campaign manager, I just kind of have to shake my head because it seems like, throwing good money after bad. The original attack on Disney, when it was just rhetoric, it got him on Fox News. He raised, for his governor's reelection, he raised money from all 50 states. He raised more money than I think any incumbent Republican governor. It made him a national figure. But he's gotten into the mess of it, and it's gotten to be a really tricky problem that the more he fights it, the more complicated and messy it gets. It's starting to really put some smudges on his, previously squeaky image. He has marketed himself and said this repeatedly to contrast himself with Trump, that he's the no drama guy. He's the competent executive. But this fight with Disney is the very definition of stupid soap opera drama. And it's not a competent executive when he, rushed forward a bill that, none of the legislators that voted for it had talked to anybody in either county or Disney or reading when they passed it. They would have repealed the whole thing, dumped $1 billion of debt onto the taxpayers. And then this second bill with this hastily appointed puppet board that's running into its own legal problems because Disney lawyers are very smart. I went to law school with some of the former and current attorneys. They are very, very clever. It's just getting worse and worse for him. How does he say he's the no drama competent guy? You get Trump without all the mess, when he is deliberately making this mess and adding more mess on top of it on a daily basis.
To your point, I was just going to say that Republicans I've talked to have said he's like Donald Trump without the baggage, without the drama. So do you think that this fight potentially can bury his campaign before it really has legs and takes off?
I said to a few friends last April when all this started that if DeSantis's political ambitions faltered, it would be because he tried to pick a fight with Mickey. So I hope that if I'm proven right, I hope that they'll be my witnesses that I called this last April. But it's the things that he has marketed himself as, that I do well. I manage this well. I've managed the state well. Florida's a big state. Has good points that he, that Florida's economy didn't suffer as bad during the pandemic as many had, even with the tourism coming to a complete halt. But how do you say you're business friendly when the messaging is, if you criticize the governor a little bit, I'm going to attack your structures, your corporate structures? I mean, one of the things that he's trying right now is trying to undo a development agreement between Reedy Creek and Disney. This isn't just a political fight with Disney. These development agreements are commonly done by real estate developers. Like if you come in and you bought a whole bunch of acres and you're building, a bunch of suburban homes, the real estate developer would put in place a development agreement that restricted, certain types of things and certain, conflicting uses to keep the quality and integrity of that development. To say that the government can come in afterward and undo that contract because they don't like something that someone involved in the project did or said, besides violating the First Amendment, there's something called an ex post facto law, and there's some other constitutional things that the government is not allowed to come in and meddle with contracts after the fact. I mean, this is sending a really chilling message to people who want to make investments in the state of Florida that, well, that's cool. There's a lot of opportunity here and we're open for business and it's the Sunshine State. But, if the governor gets a little ticked off at you, he's going to declare a nuclear war.
I think nuclear war is the perfect way to put it. I mean, the implications, as you've said, cannot be overstated. But I do now want to pivot to some historic media news of the week that you, along with everyone at Mediaite, has been covering. That Fox News has settled with Dominion Voting Systems for $787.5 million. What do you make of this enormous settlement?
Well, just to put it in perspective, this is the media settlement in the history of as far as anybody can tell. Dominion had sued for 1.6 billion, so that figure being a little shy of 800 million is just roughly under half that. It's a colossal sum of money, and it's more than the company itself has been valued. I think Eli Honig pointed out that the recent valuations for investors were showing that the company was worth about a tenth of that. But, you know, Fox may have been able to dodge two big bullets in that they didn't have to have the spectacle of Tucker Carlson or Rupert Murdoch and the rest of them being grilled on the witness stand. And they did not apparently in that settlement agreement agree to any sort of on-air apology. But what we do have is this massive record. I don't know if you've gone through the court records on this stuff, but the pretrial discovery found just, I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of pages and all these different motions that were showing all of these text messages and emails where the Fox executives and on-air personalities were admitting that the conspiracies about election fraud in the 2020 presidential election were not true, that there was no basis for them, and that they were silly and nutty and crazy. I mean, these are words that they use, nutty, crazy, and they still put them on air anyway. And, you know, I don't know how as a media outlet, as people who are saying that you're doing journalism. I mean, a lot of commentators have been mocking Fox's statement, say, you know, they say, oh, we settle this because it's our commitment to high standards of journalism or something like that, and it just makes everybody chuckle. You know, you don't pay somebody nearly $800 million when you are doing great high quality journalism. The $800 million figure says we did something very bad, and we do not have evidence that we can convince a jury that we were okay. You know, and keep in mind, rolling up to this trial, the judge had already just completely knocked the legs out a number of their key defenses. For all 20 on-air statements that were on Fox News Channel or the Fox Business Network, Judge Eric Davis in the Delaware Superior Court had already ruled that these were presented as statements of fact, not opinion, and that every single one of them was defamatory, and also knocked out a couple other defenses that Fox had tried to put forward. The fact that Dominion would have been walking into that courtroom with those statements already ruled as defamatory and only having to prove actual malice meant it was not as uphill a climb as these cases normally are. And when you have so much evidence of the executives and reporters saying, oh, we know this isn't true, it's really hard to say that the actual malice standards that you knew it was false or acted with a reckless disregard for the truth. I mean, there's all these text messages where they admit it. And furthermore, what I've always argued is more the actual malice proof in this case. It wasn't just that they knew it was false. They acted in a retaliatory manner towards any of their own reporters who sought to fact check or dial down the temperature on any of this. And you look at, there's multiple examples. You know, Leland Vittert, who's now at News Nation, that they were going after him. They were going after a couple of the other reporters. Tucker Carlson called for a couple of them to be fired. And they did, in fact, fire Chris Stirewalt and the other, at least one other person at the decision desk,
Bill Salmon,
that that made the call for Arizona for Biden. You know, they retaliated and were going after and chewing out any of their own people who were trying to tell the truth. So that sends a chilling message. I mean, if you got a mortgage and, you know, kids you're trying to save up for their college, and you see somebody at your office get fired, you're probably going to say, maybe I should not do what they did. You know, it's just, it's quite a remarkable case. And, you know, the thing to keep in mind, the story's not over. Dominion is also suing Newsmax and OAN for similar statements that were made on their airwaves. And the Smartmatic company, another voting technology company, also has a lawsuit out there against Fox with similar claims. And they're suing for, I think, 2-point-something billion. It's another astronomical number, but after an $800 million settlement, you know, what happens there?
Sarah, as you said, the story is definitely not over. And I hope as this develops, you come back on and give us your insight and commentary. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah Rumpf.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a good day.